Number 10. Minamoto no Yoshitsune. Born to the Minamoto clan, just as the Heian period was falling apart, Yoshitsune escaped the murder of his father and brothers during the Heiji Rebellion. He'd be placed in the care of monks at Kurama Temple, where he'd learn to use a sword and, more importantly, his mind. Leaving the temple, the stories of Yoshitsune drift between fact and fiction, some works of art depicting him defeating a bandit by the name of Kumasaka at the age of 15. What is held as truth is his friendship with Benkei, a warrior monk who was defeated by Yoshitsune in a friendly duel. The two would then join the Genpei War, Yoshitsune joining his brother Yoritomo, who had become head of the clan. After the war, his brother would become jealous of him, causing Yoshitsune to flee Kyoto until he was cornered and forced to fight Benkei. Supposedly, he was pressured into committing seppuku, though there is some debate on this, as the Ainu, the Japanese long-maligned indigenous peoples, hold a historical account of Yoshitsune escaping to Hokkaido. Number 9. Kusunoki Masashige. Active in the Kamakura period, Kusunoki was known for his contributions to the Kenmu Restoration in 1333. While his origins are generally unclear, it's agreed upon that he was a member of the gentry before his rise to fame. His career was spent mostly in the service of Emperor Go-Daigo in a war to overthrow the Kamakura shogunate, with the end goal of returning power to the rule of the emperor. Despite Kusunoki's tactical brilliance, Go-Daigo was kind of stupid, and a tactical error during a crucial battle led to Kusunoki's demise. His famous last words were, "Would that I had 7 lives to give for my country." Fittingly, he currently has 2 wickedly cool statues, one in front of the temple Kashinji, and the other in front of the current Japanese Imperial Palace. Number 8. Kondo Isami. A member of the Shinsengumi, Kondo Isami started life as a relatively well-known scholar and exceptional swordsman. He then rose to fame after a gang of thieves broke into his family home, which he supposedly defeated single-handedly. From there, he was trained as a swordsman, but wouldn't see action until the establishment of the Shinsengumi, where he was established as a teacher of swordsmanship and eventually made a full member. From there, he was embroiled in the conflict born from the dissolution of the Tokugawa shogunate, and while the Shinsengumi were disbanded, at that point he managed to retain a similar rank and title. From there, he was essentially forced on the back foot, and in 1868 Kondo was captured and executed under the pretense of having murdered Sakamoto Ryoma.
Number 6. Flama. Here's something new I learned. That's how you know it's going to be a good video, folks. I actually learned something, I know. Flama was a Roman gladiator, perhaps of Syrian descent, or maybe Roman, we're not exactly sure. However, the story goes like this. The Roman Colosseum, big stands with big fans, maybe even some snacks too. It may be a blood sport, but you gotta have some grub. Personally, I'm a ballpark dog kind of guy. 1 shot of mustard, 1 shot of ketchup, please. Anyway, I digress. Flama was a very interesting gladiator. Unlike most others, he took part in a lot of battles, probably the most. And like a lot of others, he was taken to become a fighter at such a young age, so he could earn his freedom. So he fights for his freedom. That's kind of crazy. The thing with Flama is that he won 4 times. Won his freedom 4 times. And each time he refused and continued to fight. It's more of a, I'm not locked in here with you situation, you're locked in here with me situation. I'm good at Call of Duty sometimes. That's gotta count for something though, right? I'm not a gladiator, but I can play Call of Duty. That's good, right? Number 5. Alexander the Great. Everyone has ups and downs except for Alexander the Great. Besides a few skirmishes here and there, he was pretty much undefeated. That's a pretty good record. But he was like 10-0, and if this was Call of Duty Search and Destroy, that's good enough for me. The Macedonian prince's empire stretched thousands of miles from Greece to northern Africa, Persia, and even some parts of India. He accomplished all of this at a very, very young age. So, you know, get off your lazy butt and do something. That means me too. I just love being a homebody, what can I say? Although I do enjoy the odd drinky poo with friends. Yeah. There's a famous quote, and I think this explains pretty much all of it. "And Alexander wept, for he had no more worlds to conquer." Tragic. It's hard being a #1 top ancient warrior guy. It really is. It's really hard. Number 4, Mad Jack Churchill. This guy needs to be talked about more, man. He's so awesome. WW2. Germany was back for the sequel, and this time with its other tough guy friend Japan and their little paisano Italy. The boys were back in town and ready to party. Mad Jack Churchill got the invitation and brought some party favors with him. What did he bring, you're asking? Well, my fellow humble bumblebees, he brought a sword and a bow and bagpipes with him, which, if you didn't know, that's ancient stuff. But he brought it to a modern war. What? What's so weird about it? This is World War II. Swords and bows just aren't it anymore. They don't belong there. In fact, Mad Jack Churchill has the last recorded longbow D-Life in history. He has been noted to play Scotland the Brave when the enemy had him in their sights. He was captured multiple times and escaped multiple times. Walking like thousands of miles to get out of there. Kind of crazy. When the war ended, he was genuinely upset it was over. He thought it was more of a game. Hollywood, if you're listening, someone make this movie or TV show. I'll play him. I'll do it. I'll come play in Scotland the Brave.
Number 3. Toyotomi Hideyoshi. We're getting into the big boys here. Originally beginning his career under Nobunaga, Hideyoshi would avenge his lord and assume authority. Constructing Osaka Castle, Hideyoshi would then engage in a series of campaigns against the Katsui and Ieyasu clans, creating the clan of Toyotomi. From there, he would campaign in an attempt to unify Japan, conquering Nagoro-ji, Shikoku, Toyama, Kyushu, and Odawara, which ended the Sengoku period. He'd also ban the peasantry from owning weapons to prevent revolts, creating a statue of Buddha from the melted remnants. He would then attempt to campaign against Korea with pretty poor results. One of his more famous acts was the perpetration of the 26 Martyrs, where 26 Christians were arrested and tortured, then crucified in Nagasaki. He'd try to war with Korea again and would achieve some victories, but it would ultimately fail. Hideyoshi passed away in 1598. This would mark the beginning of Tokugawa's prohibition of expansionist attempts until the 19th century. Number 2. Oda Nobunaga. The biggest and baddest of the boys. Oda Nobunaga was born into power, but once his father passed, the clan began to dissolve into a succession crisis. He would wrangle power from his relatives, consolidating the clan in not a moment too soon, as their longtime rival Imagawa was ready to invade. Leading an army of roughly 2,000 men against 25,000, Nobunaga aggressively battled his rivals, gaining allies and territory through frankly genius strategic calls that led the small territory to sudden and crushing victories. He would then lead a campaign to unify Japan, a massive series of wars that began the Sengoku period. His exploits are far too many for just this one point, and in 1882 he would be betrayed by Akechi Mitsuhide, who would then take the life of Nobunaga's son and force Nobunaga to commit seppuku. Number 1. Miyamoto Musashi. Swordsman, philosopher, writer, ronin. These and many more titles are attributed to the famed warrior Miyamoto Musashi, the wandering swordsman whose exploits are detailed in the self-published Book of the Five Rings. The legends and exploits of this man are legendary, from his first duel to his fight with Sasaki Kojiro, and once more, what is fact and what is fiction can be heavily debated. He was also famed for his peculiar style of combat, using one sword in each hand, a katana and a wakizashi, or sometimes a jute, a sword parrying tool. He claimed that his arms could move more naturally that way, but it also just could have been the rule of cool. Musashi's greatest achievement may have simply just been passing away peacefully in his 60s. His fame has long since lasted in media, most famous being the manga series Vagabond.
Number 10. Queen of the Red Sails. In history, when men drop the ball, there's always an iron-willed woman to pick up the slack. Not because a man is telling her to, but because she wants to. How about inheriting a whole pirate fleet from your late husband? Meet Zhang Yisao. Her husband had managed to build quite the little nautical empire, and with his untimely passing, she became the boss. She commanded a fleet of over 400 ships, and estimated between 20 to 60,000 pirates at her peak. She's noted for organizing and uniting pirates into a confederation. She also had some imperial entanglements, having entered conflict with the East India Company and the Portuguese Empire. This is a lot to go through, especially when I get anxiety from being left alone at the cashier at the grocery store. Number 9. Double Trouble. The Trung sisters from Vietnam are still celebrated today because, honey, they went through a lot. The sisters led the first resistance against Chinese dominance, which at the time had lasted over 247 years. Many believe Vietnam wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their efforts, gathering 80,000 people to join their cause, once killing a tiger and writing a proclamation of war on its hide. They managed to hold off the Chinese forces for 3 years before finally being overtaken. The Trung sisters are a great deal of national pride and pride amongst many women in Vietnam. Sadly, the Chinese proved too strong, but to prevent capture, the sisters later drowned in a last fit of defiance. Number 8. Hell hath no fury. The Roman Empire was just about good at everything. Politics, culture, building a city that would stand the test of time, and eventually outlive their civilization. But perhaps the Romans' strongest attribute was their military. I mean, come on, it's Rome, no introduction is needed here. So when a man was worried that the Romans he had worked with might take over his homeland after he had passed, he left a note in his will saying, "Please do not take this. This is mine, don't take it." I'll give the folks at home a second to think about what the Romans did next. If you guessed annex his homeland and do non-YouTube friendly conduct things to his wife and daughter, you'd be correct. His wife Boudica, not feeling so cool about what happened, took some action by gathering the tribe together and revolting against the Romans. Defeating the scrambled Romans in a battle, she then made her way to Londinium, or what's now London, and had it burned. There were empires that couldn't take down the Roman Empire, and Boudica did it like it was nothing. They did end up losing and, once again to avoid capture, drank poison. But come on, she took down the Romans.
Number 7. Sakamoto Ryoma. Mastering the sword at a young age, Sakamoto worked as a teacher of kenjutsu until the political situation in Japan took a turn for the worse. Sakamoto joined a number of anti-shogunate forces, and is credited with a number of assassination attempts, some of which did succeed, though he was known as someone who generally believed that the shogun should serve the people. He would later be assassinated by a group of attackers, who slaughtered Sakamoto and his friend Nakaoka Shintaro. The Shinsengumi was accused of the murder, leading to Kondo Asami's execution. A pro-shogun group called Miwari Gumi would confess to the murder 3 years later, but the true assassin was never found. Sakamoto's gained fame as something of a Clint Eastwood-style character in modern fiction ever since. Number 6. Yasuke. While Japan was famed for its isolation, there were many ports in which trade did occur. One of these trades was the slave trade, where Nobunaga happened upon a man who would have been extremely peculiar to his eyes. Yasuke's exact origins are unknown, but as most of the slaves traded in the area were originally from Mozambique, it's generally a solid theory that he'd have come from there, specifically the people of Yao, though others claim that Sudan and Ethiopia could have served as his homeland just as well. Either way, Nobunaga was introduced to Yasuke, originally thinking that his skin must have been painted. Accompanying a missionary, Yasuke learned Japanese and eventually became a retainer of Nobunaga, becoming the warlord's weapon bearer. We'll get more into Nobunaga later, but Yasuke was known to have been with him at the end of the warlord's life. Beyond that, Yasuke's fate is unknown, as the traitor Akechi did not kill him for quoted reasons that are gross and kind of racist, and I will not say because ew. Number 5. Hijikata Toshizo. Back to the Shinsengumi. Hijikata joined the Shinsengumi alongside Kondo, where he rose his way to the title of Vice Commander. He was famed for rooting out corruption within his organization, and his dedication to the role was so great that he refused marriage on the pretense of how dangerous it would be for his wife. Keeping the group in line, they would join the Boshin War. During Kondo's capture, Hijikata would attempt to appeal Kondo's innocence, but was repeatedly denied. Fearing the collapse of the Tokugawa, Hijikata led one final raid to steal the warship Kotetsu, where the swordsmen were repelled by the ship's crew and a Gatling gun. Driven to Hakodate before the closing of the war, he instructed his page to dedicate a poem of his death. Though my body may decay on the island of Ezo, my spirit guards my lord in the east. He was later killed, shot while riding on horseback. The Shinsengumi surrendered and was disbanded. Number 4. Tomoe Gozen. Another warrior active during the late Heian period, Tomoe was one of Japanese history's few women warriors. She served under Yoshinaka, leading 300 samurai to victory against 200 Taira warriors in 1182. Clashing with Yoritomo, they lost the battle. Yoshinaka sending Tomoe away while claiming that he'd be ashamed to die with a woman. Smooth. From there, accounts and details become muddy. Apparently she just went on a rampage, killing at least 3 major samurai before escaping. One story goes that she was captured and made to wed the soldier Wada Yoshimori, and after his death in 1213, she made her way to a temple and became a monk, living until 91. Other stories claim that she committed seppuku, and more stories yet claim that she took her lord's head, walking into the sea with it to serve him in the afterlife. Any of these could be true, and personally I think the last one is really metal, so that'd be my headcanon.
Number 4. Miss General. Fu Hao was one of 60 wives to Emperor Wu Ding, which I'm not sure even Mormons can figure that out. But to avoid obscuring into the background like TV's least favorite sister wife, she took control. According to records, she led many successful military campaigns and commanded an army of 13,000. While stories of the past can get lost, this is most likely true, as her tomb was full of many different weapons like great axes, which was common to bury distinguished generals with at the time. When I'm buried as a warrior princess, I want my collection of pop figures to come with me. I spent too much time on those bad boys to not take them with me to the afterlife. Number 3. Fatality. Tamiris was the queen of Masagate, or at least I think that's how it's pronounced, a confederation of nomadic tribes that lived east of the Caspian Sea. She ruled during the 6th century BC and is most famous for her vengeful war she waged against the Persian king Cyrus the Great. At first, the war wasn't going too great. Unfortunately, her son claimed his life out of shame for losing in battle. Mom was not happy and promised the bloodiest battle ever. Well, she wasn't lying. As the promised battle was very bloody, many Persians perished in battle, including Cyrus. When his body was recovered, the vengeful queen harnessed the power of mid-90s fighting games and removed his head and turned his skull into a cup and proclaimed, "Drink your fill of blood." Nice. Number 1. Who else could it go to but the Maid of Orleans? All the badass women who went through a lot on this list, they seen some stuff, honey. But Joan of Arc, girl, she takes the cake. Joan was born a poor peasant but had a unique gift. She could speak to the gods. And the gods told her it was her time to shine. By the time she was 19, she had led thousands of men to battle and in glorious victory. Charles VII, losing the 100 Years' War at the time, said, "Alright, sure, send the girl to fight. What have we got to lose?" Well, they actually had a lot to win. Once Joan had gotten involved, the French began to win victory after victory, and her claims of being guided by God didn't seem so far-fetched after all. The British, being so shaken up by the young girl's military prowess, thought she had been possessed by the devil. The British, not liking losing war to a teenage girl, decided to treat her with compassion by keeping her warm with a fire while she was tied to a wooden post. Joan would later become a legend for her efforts, because getting burned at the stake is honestly a lot and I can't even deal. Number 10. The Jaguar Warrior. Mesoamerica, a beautiful ancient place full of culture, wonder, and civilization. If you're a Spanish conquistador, then the most important thing there is riches, gold. There's lots of gold there. Tons and tons of riches. However, something some folks may not know about is a very powerful warrior the Aztecs had, the Jaguar Warrior. RAR XD. Don't ever do that again, sorry. that's just the worst. Yes, and just as vicious as it sounds, the Aztecs had no standing army, so most men were kind of just trained to be warriors just in case. The Jaguar Warrior was a fierce warrior who proved his salt by capturing 4 enemies. And only then he would be classified as such. Now, why is capturing enemies so important, you may ask? Well, it's so you have a plentitude of sacrifices to make when the gods ask you for some. Oh yes, they do this in full dress too, sometimes even wearing a jaguar skin on their head and their backs. It's kind of weird. Just keep your eyes out for those ones, folks. Keep your eyes out in the jungle, you never know. Number 9. Spartan. Did you really think I wasn't going to mention Spartans when talking about the most powerful warriors in history? Sparta, another beautiful ancient place full of culture and wonder. Sadly, these were times of great battles, and none were better than the Spartans at this. Complete with their Agog training, Spartans were bred for this kind of butter. Working as a unit with a group of Phalanx strategy made them extremely effective. Complete with their shield spear and short Xephos sword, the Spartans were a formidable fighting force, and the bravest of warriors. You only have to look at the examples like the Battle of Thermopylae to have this make sense, and the movie 300. I love those painted on abs, you gotta love them, right? Number 7. Ninja. The warrior that goes bump in the night. The reason why dudes with my proportion thinks warriors in black cloaks running on rooftops with frog-toed shoes are cool. Oh, nice. The ninja, stealth and espionage expert, and maybe the first to do so. The ninja were a group of mercenaries in the 15th century Japan, or at least got their start in 15th century Japan, who rose to prominence as the guys you hire when you need some shady stuff done. The battles between samurai and ninja are noteworthy to say the least. However, the fact that more often than not, instead of fighting the samurai often hired the ninjas to do their dirty work. Corruption, theft, sabotage, and just some good old-fashioned spying. Good old stuff. This sneaking around was accompanied by some excellent fighting tactics and dastardly weaponry to go along with it. The black egg in particular gives me nightmares. It's kind of like when you got something stuck in your eye and you just can't get it out, except it's not an eyelash. It's a little egg that you throw at people's faces and it's filled with crushed glass. Ouch. I don't even know how you'd get that out in ancient times. There's no eye wash station, so you know what? Cut it. I ain't part of that one. Ain't doing it. Nope. Number 7. Viva la Revolucion. Juana de Paria was born in Spanish-controlled Peru to 2 loving parents. Like many classic stories, her mother sadly passed away when she was young, where she grew very attached to her father. Although unusual for the time, her father instructed her on how to horse ride and sharpshoot. Even helped her father work during the days. They were pretty tight, but like an M. Night Shyamalan movie, there's a double twist. Her father passed away in her teens. Now an orphan, she was forced to move in with her aunt, where she quite possibly developed the very first feelings of teenage angst before there was ever an Avril Lavigne album. Juana would often have outbursts that got her eventually sent to become a nun, where that also did not go very well. During her studies, she was fond of Joan of Arc, but eventually she was expelled at a young age of 17. After years of witnessing colonial reign, she joined the revolution. She became so passionate about the cause, she once fought a battle while pregnant, went back to have a baby, and then went back to battle with the baby strapped to her back. Man, sometimes I don't even want to get up after a large meal. What a woman! Number 6. Not one step back. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was just like any other girl in Russia in the 1940s. She was in her last year of university when history's favorite mustache man invaded history's second favorite mustache man. Feeling inspired by her country's call to arms, she signed up for military service. She would eventually find her way to be a sharpshooter. During the siege of Odessa, she is credited with 187 confirmed kills. She married a fellow sniper, he died, then she went on to have over 300 confirmed kills when the war was over. Once the military realized how valuable she was pulled from the front lines, where she became key propaganda for Russia. She would also find herself training young snipers up until the end of the war. She was oftentimes referred to as the Lady of Death. Number 5. The Limping Lady. World War II was the cause and effect for a lot of things. If you like spies and espionage, it's kind of where it all started. One of the best spies who did more than her fair share was Virginia Hall, a lady with a peg leg who thwarted German plans again and again, with her sidekick and peg leg nicknamed Cuthbert. She was credited by top German officials as being the most dangerous spy of all time. In one OSS report, her team is credited with destroying 4 bridges, derailing a freight train, and neutralizing 150 enemies, with hundreds more captured. Now, I'm not a world-class detective or anything, but I feel like if you're trying to find the female spy with a peg leg, it isn't that hard, on account of, you know, some pretty specific identifying features. I don't know how you messed that up. Where is the lady? Where is her? And you like hear her walking down the hall, she got a peg leg. What do you mean? Number 3, Genghis Khan. Sometimes in life you make an impact in history. Sometimes you do so much it's hard not to talk about you. Genghis got to write his own history. The ruthless and powerful warrior from the Mongol Empire. Basically, it goes down like this. You got something he wants, albeit land to camp on, people for his empire, or just riches in general. Now, while he deletes your village and kingdom, you got 2 options. Option 1, if you don't agree with the terms and conditions of option 2, then the chaos of option 1 continues. Or option 2, assimilate into our empire or refer to the consequences of option 1. Ooh, I'll take option 2 thanks, I like to live. But keep your religious freedom though for some reason. He let people keep their religious freedom, which is kind of cool. Even for a bloodthirsty monster, he was kind of cool with that. So gold star, buddy, gold star. And of course the classic fact that he did so much bedroom stuff that his DNA is still with us today and has way too many descendants than we like to admit. That's just crazy, man. That's insanity. That's insanity. Number 2, Navy SEALs. Oh baby, some real slick frogmen. These are the guys that are sent behind enemy lines and gather vital intelligence. Some of the best. It doesn't get tougher than the Navy SEALs. Finding their roots in the Vietnam War, the Navy SEALs have been one of the toughest special forces the United States has ever seen. They've been involved in almost every major conflict the US has found themselves entangled with for the last 60 years. For me, when I think Navy SEALs, I think of the classic PS2 game. Remember that? Remember that game? I remember that game. It's pretty sick. Let's play that game back. The game was super ahead of its time. And number 1, Spetsnaz. The spearhead of Russian special forces. These are tough guys with a tough history, and ironically, enough to mirror the history of the previously mentioned Navy SEALs. Getting their start as advisors to the VC in the Vietnam War, and of course being a part of every major conflict the Soviet Union was a part of, and even the ones you may not know about. There's also a common rumor that the Spetsnaz trainees are given a pet. Sometimes it's a chicken, or it's a dog, not too sure there, the information's not great, which kind of hurts the validity of the rumor, but the point stands nonetheless. Their duty is to basically raise and love and nurture this pet until an officer instructs them to take the pet to greener pastures. Yeah, no thanks.